I think the future is also high tech and high touch. Because every trend has a counter trend. And actually, technology is never going to differentiate you. Because everyone can access it, and it just becomes a leveler. You can get left behind by it. If your competition has it, you don't. But actually, I think as human beings, we also crave that human touch, that spontaneity, that empathy, that understanding. And I think the companies in the future that win will be able to blend the best of those two. It's a really important point. And I also wonder whether there's, from a careers in the future perspective, is there more opportunities where we're craving high touch, in-person, emotionally engaging experiences that tap into that emotional source code that you're talking about in a way that technology can and never will do. And I personally think that there is a massive opportunity there.
Welcome. You know, the time we live in, there's certainly no shortage of news. Authoritarian leadership is on the rise globally, and almost every country on the planet seems to be more in debt than they could possibly ever pay back. And then, wait for it, there's the future of work. More specifically, companies like AI or OpenAI, which is ChatGPT, Google with Claude, Palantir, all seem to be able to control the world and our reality. But beyond the hype, are the Silicon Valley AI companies really at the cutting edge? Or are we being seduced into believing that? Meanwhile, China's advanced technologies are outpacing our hype. If so, the question becomes, is China our enemy or is it our new teacher? Welcome to the Dov Baron Show. Come for the stories, stay for the upgrade in meaning. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I work with elite leaders and organizations who are quietly and positively reshaping the trajectory of industries and entire nations. My work is in helping you diagnose and rewire your emotional source code so that you can stop unconsciously leading from your oldest wounds in your nervous system and lead from truth, meaning, and purpose, and that alters everything from your vision, your values, your worthiness, and your biology. On these upcoming episodes of the show, we are not only going to answer those questions that I spoke about in the opening, we're going to go there with someone who's shown business leaders what the best organizations in the world are doing to prepare. Our guest today is Adrian Simpson. He's, for the last 30 plus years, has taken over 1,000 leaders physically and virtually inside the boardrooms and shop floors of some of the world's most admired, successful, and progressive organizations. So you might want to know a bit more about Adrian because what he's doing is quite unusual, to say the least, because it's giving people an insight into things they've never considered. In 2025 alone, he took his clients to Silicon Valley to visit NVIDIA, OpenAI, Netflix, Apple, and then to China to visit TikTok, BYD, the massive electric car company that is really expanding way beyond Tesla. He's hosted virtual symposiums with CEOs of IKEA and COOs of Southwest Airlines. Through their lenses, he's experienced the defining characteristics of success, and he is uniquely qualified to advise organizations how to thrive when the speed of light leadership becomes the norm. If you're the kind of leader who wants depth over dopamine hits, hit that subscribe button right now. This is where serious thinkers come to sharpen their edge. You're about to question the very beliefs that have been burning through your potential for years. And the answers may not always be comfortable, but they will bring you the kind of results that you're going to love. Please turn up the volume and help me to welcome the co-founder of Wavelength Leadership, a UK-based boutique executive education organization with global reach, Mr. Adrian Simpson. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Dev. That's an amazingly generous introduction. Thank you.
It's always great to talk to you, mate. It's been a while. I should say you're a returning champion. You've been on the show before.
Indeed.
When you were on, it was the very, very beginning of OpenAI and those kinds of companies of coming to the thing. And now it's like AI and all those things are right in front of us. They're everywhere. And it's kind of undeniable, not only the impact, but I guess the fear that it's brought about for a lot of people. So what's it like for non-Chinese based CEO who maybe thinks that their organization is innovatively advanced to go with you and step into what's happening in China?
Let me just step back from that, Dov. I would say, actually, and I just pick it up on something you said in the introduction about the technological driven change. I would say unequivocally, having experienced what I've experienced in the last 9 months individually with my clients,
that we are facing into the greatest technological driven tsunami in a generation. And I would actually even add to that geopolitically driven tsunami in a generation. And when you have done some of the things that I did last year with clients, including in China, go for flights in 100% fully autonomous passenger carrying drones. So let me repeat that. 100% fully autonomous passenger carrying drones, no pilots. And we had our lunch delivered by drone as we walked out of an office, and we went to the Beijing Center for Humanoid Robots. Let me repeat that to you again, the Beijing Center for Humanoid Robots. You understand that change per se actually is not the threat. Insularity and obsolescence is. And if you do not have your radar on and your antennae up as a leader as to what's happening outside your industry and sector, you can be completely blindsided. And so, to your question, you get off the plane in China and you step 6 to 7 years into the future. That's the truth.
So let's just pause there for a minute, Adrian, because I want people to grasp that for a minute. You're talking about non-pilot driven passenger carrying drones.
Yeah.
The futuristic taxi in a sci-fi movie. You got your lunch delivered. That's kind of conceivable-ish in our world today. What you're talking about is it seems like sci-fi. And so to the question, which is these companies in the West, in Silicon Valley, which you and I have talked about before, is so small compared to the technology of China.
Yeah.
Like it must be one hell of a slap upside the head.
It is a massive reality check, and it is petrifying. One of the things you learn about very rapidly is what we call China speed and China scale. And so if you look at the facts, these are facts. This is not hype. And this is a reality check. So last year, 1/3 of all the products in the world were manufactured in China. Okay. They installed more robots and more solar panels in their factories last year than the rest of the world combined. They issued more AI patents, shockingly, last year than any other country, including the US. They now control circa 80% of the global supply of solar panels and of EV batteries. So every electronic vehicle in the world, 80% of the batteries come from China. They control about 65% of the global EV market. You mentioned earlier BYD, now the largest manufacturer of EVs in the world. If you talk about China's speed and scale, BYD on average, I repeat this, on average issue 19 technology patents a day.
19 technology patents a day.
From the world's largest manufacturer of EVs. Right?
Wow.
Compare and contrast that with any incumbent. They control, sort of 80% of the global drone market. Sectorally, they now lead in a couple of really key surveys. It's reckoned that they are number one about 37 out of 44 key industry sectors globally. And really scarily, if you think about it, it's reckoned by about 2027, 2028, they will control 60% of the world's renewable energy market, which essentially makes them the Saudi Arabia of the new oil.
There's so much to unpack there, Adrian. There's a tsunami of awareness right there. So I'm going to go back to that question that I proposed in the beginning. From your point of view, so this is not political, this is not some obscure left or right place. This is a guy who's on the ground walking the biggest companies in the world into these places.
Yeah.
Is China the new enemy or is it our new teacher? From what you're seeing.
I think it is an incredible source of inspiration, and I think it's an incredible source of provocation, I think is the way to answer that question.
So tell us what you mean by that.
Well, because they are deploying and advancing technologies at such a rate, at such a scale, and they are dominating in so many industry sectors that they are showcasing the way as to the future. And as I said to you, when you're talking about their regulation and that has enabled the world's first fully licensed operator of autonomous passenger drones to operate, they're a source of provocation, a sort of challenge. And let's just dig into that one for a moment. Let me understand, and this is one of the other things you need to understand about China. I am a massive Silicon Valley fan. I'm a massive American fan. I've taken clients to Silicon Valley for years and years and years. And so I am not for a second Silicon Valley bashing. I love it, and there's loads to be learned from there. Silicon Valley is a 50-mile radius from San Francisco south, which is about a $15 trillion economy. In China, you have a decentralized approach to innovation. You're talking 33 different provinces where you have deep expertise in certain aspects of new technology. So, for example, we went to a city called Hufei, which I suspect you've never even heard of. Frankly, I couldn't even spell it to you right now. It's about 12 million people. And that is now the center, which is where EHang, this company that does the autonomous drones operating, Hufei has now become the epicenter of the low altitude economy.
Low altitude economy.
This is a whole new economy.
Yeah, well, I'm not familiar with what that means.
So what it means is, in addition to moving people via drone, which you can think of user cases. So I was on a call only before Christmas with a good friend of mine who's the chief people officer at Southwest Airlines. And I said to her, Houston, you have a problem, hypothetically speaking, because this company is listed on New York Stock Exchange. These drones are now operating, although they fly them around a certain park, they're not yet flying between city, but they are right on the cusp of doing that. The moment I am a business leader sitting in Dallas, Texas, I need to go to a rapid business meeting in Houston. And on the top of my tower is a fully autonomous drone that carries two people at 180 miles an hour at 2,000 feet and get me from Houston South in 15 minutes. Right? Okay. Why the hell am I going to drive to an airport, check in? I mean, why am I going to do that? But then the other variant of that is, and we saw this, once you've cracked the technology for the deployment of people, which is the hardest thing to do, you re-engineer the chassis, which is what they've done. And they've now got a drone that will take a 275 kilogram payload between locations. So I had with me the CEO of the largest retailer in Europe, one of the largest retailers in the world, Tesco, with me. His reflection when we were there, he was saying, oh my God, this thing can go 130, 150 miles. It can travel at this speed, this altitude. I've got a warehouse in the east of London. I've got a warehouse in the middle of England. I've also got stores in Scotland that it takes a truck a day and a half to get to because they're so remote. This changes the economics of logistics. Now, it's not there yet, but this is, you're right on the cusp. At the moment at which you can start to move 275 kilogram payloads of goods using fully autonomous battery-powered drones, that's a threat to the logistics economy because it's about scale and speed and this kind of stuff. When I talk about provocation, all of a sudden, this is where I say you have to have your radar on and your antennae up, because trying to do this in the US for years and years and years, to my knowledge, they haven't put a human being in a drone and flown it and never mind get it licensed. The Chinese are doing it, and this is a New York Stock Exchange listed company. So whether it's 2 years out, 3 years out, but this whole new economy emerges, literally the low altitude economy, and you start to think about when this technology is refined and deployed. And even if you go, actually, do you know what, get into a geopolitical point, if America decides not to allow these technologies in because of tariffs and what have you, just look at the operational efficiency and productivity increases to Chinese companies because they can deploy and use these technologies.
So you've talked about all these advances, which, again, seem incredibly futuristic and maybe even a long way out for a lot of people of what they imagine is even possible. But you also talked about that there's a geopolitical side to this, because love him or hate him, Donald Trump is a leader we've not seen in America before. There are things going on with digital ID in the UK that is freaking a lot of people out. There's a massive shift in authoritarian leadership that's become bigger than it ever was anywhere, just even as a concept in the US, but around the world. We're seeing a multipolar world. There are many things changing. How do you see this shift in technology and this advancement of China as part of that? Or maybe you don't. Maybe I'm making shit up, which is entirely possible.
We had a really interesting hypothetical conversation when we were in China as a group, which was, if you take EVs and you go to China and you experience the product that's available, right? These absolutely astonishingly beautiful electronic vehicles We got into one from a company called Xiaomi, which up until 3 years ago was only and still remains like the world's third largest producer of cell phones. And they are like the world's biggest producer of Internet of Things devices. So robot cleaners, smart fridges. And all of a sudden you do that, you leap into automotive, as you do. And they produced what is the fastest selling car in history. They sold like 200,000 cars after the first 24 hours of launching the new SU7.
And what people should know is that this is not just a technologically advanced vehicle. It's incredibly lower priced than something like a Tesla, vastly cheaper and far more beautiful. I remember I sat in a Tesla when they first came out and thought,
yeah,
this is a bloody Corolla. It was so basic. And these cars are so, like, luxurious.
They're beautiful. They're quick. You're talking here 45,000, 40,000 US dollars, 50,000 for the higher end vehicles. But these things will carry a family of four. They'll do 0 to 60 in 3.534 seconds. And critically, and this is the oh my God moment, the new SU7 Xiaomi from flat to full charge, 30 minutes.
Wow. Wow.
And to 80% charge in like 15 minutes for like a 500 kilometer range. Okay. So, which is a game changer. So you're paying 35, 40,000 bucks for a car that could get your family from 0 to 60, and it looks gorgeous. Every aspect of the vehicle is thought through. We were like, wow. We were like, oh my God. You could have an option whereby if you're a fisherman, you open the front trunk, as you would say in the air, and they can have a waterproof tank where you can keep the fish fresh.
What?
Right. So it's like, it's like, so, it's like, it's great.
It's a
stuff,
mobile
right?
fish carrier?
It's great. It's great. But, and you can have options for like cameras. It's a device on wheels. So as you walk up to the device, it recognizes your phone. It goes, it's Dov. It adjusts the seat. It adjusts the heating. It puts the music on that you like. It's a seamless digital experience. And also they have cameras on the roofs of some of them where you can have an option. And if you then go to like a beautiful vista, you can live stream to your family and friends from the Grand Canyon. It's crazy. Like for like money you can't even believe. You should watch it if you haven't seen it. The interview with the CEO of Ford Motor Company, where he talks about these features and this cost price, and he's like going, they have just absolutely outmaneuvered us, and talks about the greatest tragedy to the US automotive industry was Apple's decision to pull out, and arguably the fact that Google have only done Waymo B2C. They may still go there, but a technology leader reinvented the automotive marketplaces in China, and you haven't done that in the US. From a geopolitical perspective, though, and we started getting into this conversation, you could see a situation where you have a two-priced world. Either you say to people, you just can't have that car. I'm really sorry, Dov. I know you'd love a Xiaomi SU7 that can do all those things, look as good as that, and charges from flat to 500 kilometers in 30 minutes, but you're a US citizen and tough. Or actually, you can have one, Dov, but it's going to cost you $120,000. Do you get a point from a geopolitical perspective where the consumer, the voter, suddenly says, hang on a minute, hang on a minute? Or in this crazily disruptive geopolitical landscape in which we operate, does another Trump V2 come along and go, I'm going to remove the tariffs. I'm going to lower inflation. I'm going to give the American consumers the access to the best products in the world at the lowest possible prices. Game on. And we love you, General Motors, but we can no longer protect you with tariffs. When they've got factories, we went around the Xiaomi factory, 97% fully automated robot-run factory. And it'll be a dark factory so soon, which is 100% automation, producing a car every 62 seconds.
62 seconds.
For a car.
Wow.
And so I think from a geopolitical perspective, I'm just putting a consumer angle on it. Americans, their cost of living is getting higher. Everyone's feeling it. Is there a conversation to be had, which is if Ford Motor Company and General Motors and other American businesses just have not innovated rapidly enough, haven't adopted these technologies for whatever reason, geopolitical, technological, whatever it is, or just lack of bravery, are you going to continue to deny citizens in the West, not just America, access to these products and services by tariffs and protectionism? Or is there a point at which the consumer fights back and says, no, actually, We want now access. Why are we paying 3 times the price of what people in Asia, not just China, Asia and Africa? Don't forget China controls lots of Africa. If I live in those parts of the world, I can access these amazing products, amazing services, incredible functionality, a third of the price, and I can't do so because Western companies haven't got their act together and we're just protecting jobs through tariffs.
But again, we're still at this question. So the argument against China is the CCP, Chinese Communist Party, and their style of leadership versus what has been seen as Western democracy. Western democracy is under threat from an authoritarian system. And not just talking about Donald Trump. There's more countries adopting authoritarian leadership than there is adopting democracies. That's not my opinion. That's notable. You can do the research on that. We used to have a term when I was a kid and we talked about beneficent authoritarians. So it's kind of like, you're authoritarian, but you're all right. And there's some people I know live in Hungary who think that that's kind of the case. But in many ways, that's what China seems to be, although it's not a single person, it's a collective. Do you think that with what you just talked about, all those fighting about it's ridiculous that we're paying this amount of money for this and things are so expensive and if we can get it there in Asia, observing that and observing the Americans that you take there, do you see a shift in the way we lead because of the technology? And you may not have been asked that question before because it's not really your area, but you have this observation that most people will never get, Adrian.
I think the big aha or moment is that the lack of a democratic system in China has enabled government to play a critical role in driving the innovation agenda for the country. And they came up 10 years ago with Plan 2025 that said we were going to be number one in AI, EVs, energy sectors. And because they came up with the century-driven plan 10 years ago, they were then able to create an infrastructure that said that tax breaks for provinces, tax breaks for companies, investment, government money available, and so forth, which of course gives companies the ability to have long-term strategic planning that says, okay, right, if energy is going to be the most important thing for China in 10 years' time, I, as a startup, are going to go into that sector, VCs can invest in it, and so forth.
Yeah, it's not done on the next quarter the way the American stuff is done.
And also decentralized. So you go to places like Shenzhen, which is the manufacturing hub. We were hearing stories like if you're a startup in manufacturing in Shenzhen, there isn't a single component for any product in the world isn't more than like 20 minutes from your front door. So like whatever widget you need, whatever electronic component you need, it's in that ecosystem. That's just a competitive advantage, bar none. The problem is, and we have this in the UK, short-term democratic, I'm in for 4 years, I have to go for popularism. I'm not even bother talking about innovation strategy because by the time it's implemented, I'll probably be out and retire. You know what I mean? It's a really complex conversation because, of course, we want the kind of a leadership perspective, leadership of countries perspective, I guess is the question I'm talking to about here, which is this long-term thinking, this long-term planning. And I don't know what the answer is. I could see possibly in Europe, but you're right, with the rise of authoritarianism, not. But for the countries like Germany's and the France's and the UK's who collectively decide, actually, we need to have a response to this, we could start to think about, could we create a more innovation-led economy in Europe rather than trying to do it short-term by country? It's complex. It's very complex. What my clients got from it is when you understand that pace and scale of what's coming out of China, you need to double down and innovate to remain relevant in a way you've never done before as an organization, because insularity and obsolescence is the route to failure, which is when you understand what's coming at you, you need to be going. You can't wait for governments. You can't stand by and go, Trump or somebody else is going to put a great policy in. What are we in control of? What could we do to face into these challenges? How do we innovate, even partner with Chinese? We don't know, but let's not ourselves blind.
That leads me to the question, which is about innovation. I've often said that in my experience, most companies don't innovate. They tweak. They call it innovation, but it's not innovation. It's a bloody tweak. You added this or you added that. I mean, it's incremental. Your iPhone's not much different than it was 10 years ago, really. It's been little tweaks here and there. I have an Apple phone because I have an Apple computer, because it's a system. But really, am I buying it for its technological? No, it's a brand, and I get that. I understand that. So there's not really innovation. And I think that that's part of the Western laziness around this, whereas the Chinese have really understood what innovation is. So my question to you is, when you take these guys or these people to China to see these things, do they get it, or do they throw their hands in the air and go, Jesus, we are so far behind, there is no catching up, because we don't have a system in place that facilitates that level of innovation. So we have to wait around for Donald Trump to throw some tariffs at it and hope that that slows down so that we can bring manufacturing back to America. God knows why, especially when dark factories are showing up in China, in Mexico, even in Africa.
Yeah, I do think that you get it. I do think they get it. And let's go back to my point earlier. I think it's a wake-up call. It's a massive wake-up call. What China is a massive wake-up call. It's like oh my God, I had not realized we've been asleep at the wheel. You suddenly realize this is the most advanced digital economy in the world, the fastest, the hungriest, the bravest. And it isn't just a province like Silicon Valley, it's the whole country. And so you could react and go, okay, it's just game over. What do we do? I think what great leaders do is go, okay, well, faced into that, what can I control? What can I do? So can I double down my organization's efforts in innovation in a properly bold, disruptive sense? And I can talk about that because I have seen some examples of organizations that have successfully created sort of disruptive innovation units that haven't been disconnected from the mothership. They're tied in and they make a demonstrable difference. And as an attitudinal thing, so there was a great moment when one of the companies we visited was at the forefront of last mile delivery. Okay. And they're using, again, autonomous vehicles to do last mile delivery. And the guy talked about how they're doing a trial in Palo Alto. Fascinatingly, because the economics of last mile delivery using scooters and Ubers is horrific. It's horrific. This vehicle drives around the Palo Alto city center. You phone up, place an order, as do other people. The algorithm goes right. The EV then goes low speed down the high street. The people come out, open up a hatch, put the meal in, and then the vehicle drives around the neighborhood, keeps the meal fresh, sends you a WhatsApp when it says it's outside, you come and pick your meal up. Great. So you've now moving 12 meals rather than one. And anyway, the guy revealed the fact that he's also trialing in the UK, because the first thing was doing mapping. And you can't put them on the streets, but literally one of my clients, the CEO of a big business, just said, hell, we'll partner with you. I've got hundreds of thousands of acres of logistics facilities, warehouse facilities, access to private roads. We'll just do a trial with you. If we can partner together and we can figure out together that there is an economic deployment of your product and your service, we'll take the regulator on with you. And now one of the biggest companies in the country is coming to the regulator rather than just a little tiny startup. And that for me was a great attitude, which was like, if we just sit here and wait, nothing's going to happen. What can I control? Well, I have all these warehouses, all these facilities, all these logistics, and then together we can get the data we need to be able to then go to the regulator and say, you've been partnering for a year in this trial, no one's been hurt. Because he was going, look, I've got a massive problem with last mile delivery. It's a massive pain point for me. The cost is bad, the consumer experience is bad. If you're offering a solution, I thought it's just a great attitude of just like, come on, let's just control what we can control.
So there are companies who are taking this on. You said like that's the leader with Tesco in the UK, but what about in the United States? Where are you seeing that somebody who's coming back from your trip to these amazing factories and stuff in China is coming back and saying, okay, here's what we're going to do? Do you have companies that you...
Have I got an example of a client that's come from the US to China to come back and affected change? No, not yet. I haven't got one example right now.
Because what I'm getting from you is that the number one focus for leaders in the context of what we're talking about needs to be innovation.
Yes.
And yet nobody's coming back and innovating.
Yeah. And I think it's innovation, but also awareness and understanding. You know, what I say to you at the start, which is this insularity and this obsolescence is a real threat for me. And as much as I love Silicon Valley, it is an echo chamber. It is an echo chamber.
Everybody's patting everybody on the back, telling everybody how good they are.
Exactly. And don't get me wrong, there's some amazing stuff happening, and I'm a huge fan of many of the companies you've listed earlier, and I'm still going there. But there's as I say, when you go out of Silicon Valley, So let's just even accept in Silicon Valley, there's a load of innovation going on. And don't get me wrong, there is. And so just to speak on Silicon Valley for 1 minute, even in the last 2 years, I've also seen a shift. So I've been going to Silicon Valley for 25 years. It's never been possible to meet anybody who makes anything because it's always software's eating the world. I'm going to get your pizza faster to your home using an app or another way to chat to your friends. Now AI is at the point where it's going into physical AI, which is the next frontiers of AI, into robots, into machines. There is now an economy starting in Silicon Valley of humanoid robotics companies. When I was in the Valley last year with a major client in retail, we took them to visit humanoid robotics players. They're not quite where the Chinese are, but rapidly. And I was like, hurrah. So at least Silicon Valley's breaking out the bubble of just software's eating the world. And I think NVIDIA is a big part of that because they've got a big play in robotics so far. So it's great. But step outside of Silicon Valley, I smiled to myself when I was like, oh my God. So we talk about the Bay Area. In China, they talk about the Greater Bay Area, which is the southern part of China, which is a collective of about 15 cities with 70 million people in a whole ecosystem of innovation. That's just one little section called the Greater Bay Area. Forget your Bay Area. And then you move out of that, you go to Hubei, where there's 12 million people, and you go to Beijing, where there's another center. Then you go to Hangzhou, where Alibaba are out of, and then a whole bunch of other cities around the whole country that you've never even heard of, where there's tens of millions of people living at the frontiers of innovation. And you just kind of go, where's America in that? And it feels like to me, if I'm sort of exaggerating it for a point, it feels like the kind of innovation battle is Silicon Valley versus China, not China versus America. And that doesn't feel like a very fair fight.
When you're there, of course, you're seeing these companies, but you're also in the country. So you're traveling, you're getting on a train or a plane or whatever it is, and you're in the major cities. The people don't know unless they're up to date. There's palm identification to get you through things for ID. You pay with your palm, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Things that, again, quite sci-fi for most people. What's it like experiencing it? Because you're taking people to see the advances, but you're also in the process of that, experiencing this, quote, advanced society. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I'm going to be very, very clear. My exposure has been in the big city epicenters, the Beijings, the Shenzhens, the Hangzhous. It's seamless. And it's at a speed and scale which is unprecedented. You are absolutely aware of, and let's be really candid, it's a surveillance society. And so there are cameras everywhere, but actually I've heard this a number of times that apparently there are more cameras in London per person than there are in China. And that wouldn't massively surprise me.
Yeah, per capita, there are more cameras viewing the individual in London, in the city of London, than there are in any other place on the planet, including Moscow, including Beijing.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing also, which is incredible, Dov, and again, this is a whole geopolitical issue, it feels unbelievably safe. And so this is a true story. So when I was in China in October, I met an amazing man called Professor David Gosset, so one of the world's leading geopolitical experts, and speaks around the world on China and is French. He took a group of his Chinese nationals who worked for him in their 20s to Paris in September last year. And after 24 hours, they asked if they could go back because they didn't feel safe in Paris. Because of the level of harassment to young women, the glances, that one of them had a backside pinched, someone had their phones stolen, and then when they were walking down some of the streets, they were just like, we just don't feel safe. And he was like, and I love Paris, I love London. My PA bangs onto me all the time about me walking down the streets of London with my cell phone in my hand because of the amount of cell phones that are being stolen. You go to a tube station, an underground station in London, they are telling you as you exit, put your phone away. You don't feel any of that moving around in China whatsoever. You feel incredibly safe, to be honest with you. And that's just a sobering reality. That's the case.
That's also the selling feature for things like Palantir, which are terrifying for me, at least.
Yes.
Terrifying because we become the surveillance society. And the problem with that is, as we talk about AI, we also have to go to, and these jobs and these dark factories, and we go to, there's no work. And then we go, well, how do people live? And well, maybe a universal basic income. Well, if we do that, then you're being paid by the government. And if you misbehave, well, maybe you don't get any money for rent, or you don't get any money for travel or food or whatever it is. And so it's safe, but you're under control. And that's not China.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the world. Palantir is moving into the world. Palantir scares the shit out of me. There was the Black Mirror episode that was about the social credit system, which is fully embraced in China. And it's where we're going with Palantir. So do you have any sense of that side of it, Adrian, when you're in that world?
I guess this is the conversation you get, the trade-off, isn't it? Which is the safety comes out of the fact that you are being surveilled. We were talking to some Chinese nationals about what it's like, okay? And there was a great story. One of my crew was a documentary filmmaker, and she said she was doing some filming in an area where she shouldn't have basically been. And she said the first thing you noticed was you were basically being watched. And then the second thing that basically happened was a taxi basically pulls up, and she's given a tap on the shoulder and basically says, that's for you, right? And then sort of like the third conversation then is basically an appointment at the local police station, where basically they had she said not a threatening, but a very clear conversation that basically said, you're an area you shouldn't have been. You were talking to people about things you shouldn't have been talking to, hence the taxi, hence you need to move on. And she was a bit like, I know the guidelines. I'm happy to kind of operate in that. We're getting into an area where I'm not sure I'm totally the best person to speak to about it, but I do feel, it's fascinating.
But this is why I'm bringing it up, because it is this line at the edge of the utmost technology that we're all, not all, but good many people are very excited about where we're going, and we're going to be living in this sci-fi future. And there is a trade-off. There is always a trade-off with anything. And the question is, do we hold a moral compass as we go there? The two major addictions of human beings, in my work around the emotional source code, which is neuroscience, quantum physics, and psychology, the two highest of all addictions of human beings are not substances. Number one is identity, who we see ourselves as. And number two is comfort. And comfort means familiarity. What's convenient? What's familiar? Why do you buy from Amazon? Do you like Amazon? They go, no, I hate that bastard Jeff Bezos, and I hate what he's doing with his people, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so do you buy from Amazon? Yes. Do you have Amazon Prime? Yes. Well, if you hate them, vote with your dollar. Well, it's convenient. Yes, because Amazon is not Amazon. It's 7-Eleven. It's a convenience store. It's not cheaper. It's more convenient. That's the simplicity of it. And so we trade off our moral compass for the convenience. And that happens all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what you're seeing when you said the seamless in China.
Yeah, exactly. If I was going to a slightly sort of related tangential point, and this is something I'm talking to my clients about at the moment, which is when you see the technological driven changes that are changing consumer behavior, which is the other thing I think you need to think about AI, because so many people are focused on AI for, I've got a Copilot license. Fantastic. Good for you. Says all your competition. And I'm using AI to drive a bit of productivity, a bit of headcount reduction. Great. That's not the thing. The point is it's driving also consumer behavior changes. And we could talk a little bit about that. The other thing is I personally think, and maybe this taps into a little bit of hope, is I think the future is also high tech and high touch. Because every trend has a counter trend. And actually, technology is never going to differentiate you, because everyone can access it, and it just becomes a leveler. You can get left behind by it if your competition has it, you don't. But actually, I think as human beings, we also crave that human touch, that spontaneity, that empathy, that understanding. And I think the companies in the future that win will be able to blend the best of those two. It's a really important point. And I also wonder whether there's, from a careers in the future perspective, is there more opportunities where we're craving high touch, in-person, emotionally engaging experiences that tap into that emotional source code that you're talking about in the way that technology can and never will do. And I personally think that there is a massive opportunity there.
I think you're right. I had on Decai, who is one of the founders of AI. He wrote the Google Translate back in the day. He wrote a fabulous book called Raising AI, because I had written this piece around transhumanism, talking about how we are moving towards transhumanism, but we have to understand that AI is our child. And if you're worried about AI, stop putting shit into AI that you don't want it to regurgitate, because it will. Decay talks about it in that way as well. My argument in that book is that the future of work is human. It's not AI. The future of work is human. Being more human is going to be the highest value. We told kids 20 years ago, get into coding, dead job. It's done, finished. It's the human side of it. My work, which is deeply human, no AI is ever going to do it because it's so incredibly subjective. When somebody sits with me and does that work, nothing could ever get to that because I have to pay attention to 1,000 minuscule little things that are going on underneath the surface. A robot could probably take people to China and do the things you're doing, but it's never going to be the same as Adrian going there and offering a perspective that is going to be different. So I think you're absolutely right about that. And I think at the same time, we have to look at it, as you said, this counterpiece of this movement, but it's the in-between. For instance, you and I talked shortly after COVID last time. Everybody got shut in, and we thought everybody was going to go back out, but they didn't. A lot of people don't want to go back to work. They don't want to go back into the office. The bowling club is gone. The bridge club is gone. Even church people are doing online, et cetera, et cetera. And yet, Gen Z, who spent their formative years, want experience. They want to get out. The millennials, the Gen X, and the boomers, we've become lonely and isolated. Many of us don't feel like we're lonely, but we are isolated. We don't go out in the world. The Gen Zers want to go out in the world. But there's been this 5 to 10 year gap in the middle. And that's what I'm concerned about with this, is that 5 to 10 year gap where people don't have an income, they don't have a job, they don't have a purpose, before there's a psychological evolution and revolution of what it is that we want in our world.
Yeah.
You're talking to people at the cutting edge here, are recognizing that.
I don't think the right people are recognizing it. I'm a massive fan of Scott Garraway. I consume quite a lot of his stuff. I was watching a very, very sobering interview with him recently when he talked about the social isolation of young men in America. If you're a Tinder profile and you're not in a certain postcode and a certain demographic in a certain income bracket, 90% of the attention is going to 10% of the men and leaving the rest of the statistics on how many young men haven't had a date, haven't had a sexual relationship, and are living in their basements alone and isolated. And he said the words, he said, "We know the shooter before we've met the shooter."
Of course.
And we are creating a generation of them. And I was like, wow. I mean, petrifying. His read on that is, he's over in the UK saying the same sort of thing. And it isn't just about that. It's about walking to a morgue. And he said there's 5 dead people of the age of 34 of them are male. Really, really frightening. I'm delighted he's getting a forum. But what do you do? The response from governments has to be geared into the problem. In the UK, you know, so many of the places where young people could go to meet, to connect, have gone away. The youth clubs of our days, the centres, there has to be policies to go, how do we create and encourage people to get out and connect as human beings again?
We're having this conversation as if it's a technology conversation. And it is a technology conversation, but it's far more. It's a cultural conversation. It's a societal conversation. And saber rattling isn't going to fix it. And blaming the ones who are more technologically advanced than others isn't going to fix it. And turning us all into children of Palantir isn't going to save us. There's a deep societal crack that we're kind of ignoring and paying attention to the technology. And we're seeing the results of that in the UK. I mean, governments last about 10 minutes there. And I'm old enough that I remember Harold Wilson and Maggie Thatcher. Very clearly Labour, very clearly Tory, very clearly left, very clearly right. One was Union pro, one was Reagan-esque. Very different. Now I can't really tell the difference between the Tories and the Labour Party in the UK. I can't really tell the difference much between traditional Republicans and traditional Democrats. That's not the Democrats or the Republicans of today. We've societally gone to a place that's very difficult. So I want to flip this back a little bit on you, because I happen to know that you have a passion for radio drama. Don't you feel like you're living in a radio drama right now?
Yes, you do. Yes, you couldn't make it up. You absolutely do. When I, as a UK citizen, wake up to the news that America might invade Greenland or take over Greenland, and like suddenly there's
or Canada, or Cuba, or Colombia.
you can't make this shit up. You're absolutely right. I'm gone for flying drones in China, and I'm going for Waymo rides in San Francisco. Seem old hat now, but although actually amazingly 1/3 of all taxi journeys in San Francisco are now Waymos, which is amazing. But you're right. The unpredictables become the predictable almost. Every day you're challenged to think, oh my God, that could never happen. That could never happen. Oh my God, it just has. It's petrifying.
It's so vastly different that I think it's so very easy for us to misunderstand what's actually going on and to misinterpret what's going on.
Yeah.
Before we continue, I want to speak to you as a listener, as you listen to this, because there's a part of you that knows you're not here, as in listening to this conversation by accident. There's a part of you that knows leadership it's not a role, it's an invitation. It's an invitation for you to step up and not just look at leadership from a business point of view, but from a societal position, from an impact position. You're listening to this show because you already understand that it is an invitation to be more. And I challenge you to do that, because if you're listening to this and you recognize that, then you stand apart from so many. But there's another level, a level where your nervous system stops reacting to life and starts directing it. Understandably, very few actually cross that threshold. If you're one of the few and you want to be part of my inner circle, go to dovbaron.com and join those doing the real work in making the biggest difference, the work that rewires your identity, recalibrates your brain, and strips away the noise that keeps leaders trapped in a survival mechanism, which we've talked a lot about in this show. Inside the Curious Chronicles newsletter, I share what does not usually get out into the public space, a deeper sense of neuroscience, the emotional source code practices, material reserved for those who are ready for something closer to an invitation rather than information. You feel that pull? Trust it. Reach out to me, Dov Baron, at dovbaron.com. You can write Dov at dovbaron.com, and I'll always respond to you. Let's get back here to our guest. You're talking a lot about this light speed leadership. Talk to us what you mean by that.
What I mean is, faced into this level of technological, geopolitical speed, that change that we're facing into, I think requires organizations to meet at a much faster pace than they ever have before. I think structurally that poses some challenges. And so I love to cite a couple of examples of companies that just move much faster, much quicker. One of my favorite examples actually is Netflix. And I think what you need to realize now, Netflix is what a 35-year-old company is. There's no not a new kid on the block, the most successful entertainment company in the world. And I don't think it's by accident that one of the tenements of their culture is something they call the informed captain decision-making model. This came about because when they were forming the company, quite a few of the original founding team had worked in other large corporates, and they said, do you ever recognize a scenario where you walk into a room and you look around you and it's absolutely clear who can say no and no one's got a clue who can say yes? And I think it's symbolic of the decision-making processes in large companies, where things are discussed ad nauseum. They go up the food chain for discussion, then they're refined and they're fed back down again for further refinement. And by the time a decision's been made, the world's moved on, and often the people have moved on. Netflix, it's the opposite. The way it works is, this is very like a simplistic version of it. If you are leading a project, let's say I'm in India and I want to decide to tweak the pricing of the subscription. It's not the highest paid person, it's the most informed person would become the informed captain. And then basically your job is to say, okay, I think as the project manager for India, we should increase the subscription charges by 50 cents. Your number one expectation then is to farm for dissent, where you create a forum, physically or digitally, where you bring leaders into the conversation from different departments, different divisions, and their job really is to kind of really test your hypothesis. And you present and say, this is my rationale, and then they're questioning you, they're probing you, they're challenging you. But at the end of that process, you've then got a three-way choice. You can either go, thank you very much indeed, I'm going to double down, or either thanks for your backing, and that's great, I'm just going to crack on, or actually, I'm really sorry no one got it, but I think I'm right. I'm just going to crack on. Number two, course correct, probably most likely, which is I hadn't thought of that angle. Or number three, you cancel. But the decision is on you as the informed captain, not a big committee, because you are the best positioned person to make that decision, which enables much more decentralized, rapid decision-making processes. And NVIDIA have exactly the same sort of thing. They call it the pilot in charge. So you've got two of the most successful companies in the world that are doing that. TikTok, fascinating to discover in China. One of the big things in China, parallel teams to execute quicker.
So tell me what you mean by that. That's really interesting.
You want to launch a new product or a new service or even to improve an internal process, you set two internal teams up with the same brief to compete with each other.
Wow.
Speed of light, because things are going to happen faster. You looking over your shoulder and there's a team of your colleagues that are working on exactly the same brief, that drives an internal competition because there's only going to be one winner. So they want the recognition, they want the reward. Brilliant. Why wouldn't you do that for something that's really important? So structurally things that you can do to improve that. We heard a story where TikTok, the CEO of TikTok, wasn't happy that the company was moving fast enough. So he shortened the reporting cycle from quarterly to every 6 weeks because he wanted a pulse check of where everything was. So that was a structure he put in place. He said, you haven't got 3 months, you've got 6 weeks to move the needle. So This speed of light leadership for me is about saying, what can you do as a leader structurally to get decisions made quicker, faster, perhaps more decentralized, or indeed you just want to shift the needle. I'm going to shift the reporting cycle. But to a conversation also that we had last time as well, which is this for me goes to alignment, because I think there's a truth in business. There's a truth in business. What gets measured, recognized, rewarded, and celebrated gets done, period.
Say it again, because I think people need to take a moment and just write that down.
Yeah. So what gets measured, recognized, rewarded, and celebrated gets done, period. And that's such a great thing for companies to understand, because if I am not incentivized, recognized, motivated, or celebrated for behaving in a certain way, why the hell would I do so? And I see this in innovation. I see it in speed. So people talk about innovation culture. We want a fast-moving, agile, blah, blah culture. Everybody knows that the guy that just went up the food chain got promoted basically did so because he cut costs, made budget, treated people like an a-hole, and half his team left. It didn't matter because he made budget and cut costs. You tell me that's important, but what I see gets recognized, rewarded, and celebrated is the opposite behavior. And this goes to speed of light leadership or innovation. If you want speed of light innovation, if you want speed like Netflix are doing, this is what great looks like. This is our process, this is our system, and everything aligns behind that. I was in a conversation with a senior leader at Netflix where I was digging into this. I don't know if you're aware of this, but another tenement of the Netflix culture is that they put this in their culture deck before you join the company, is a very provocative statement that says adequate performance equals a generous severance package.
Love that.
Okay, that's in the culture deck, Dov, before you join the company. So do not kid yourself. This is not a comfortable, lovey-dovey. This is a high performance culture. I get it. I'm going to buy into it. Fantastic. She talks about in the interview process, we will ask you to come and prepare a discussion on something that we think is really important, you're passionate about. What are we doing? We're testing the farming for dissent part of our culture. We're not so much caring on how polished you are. We want to understand how you deal with the feedback, how you process the questions. So in the interviewing, I'm aligning to one of my cultural tenements, which is fantastic. And then when I talked to her about when does that kind of adequate performance equal generous severance package kick in, she said, often, Adrian, she said, if someone's been here 12, 18 months, they've been the informed captain on 2 or 3 things, the project's gone badly. That in itself is not necessarily the problem. The problem is when we've looked back, they either didn't farm for dissent, or they did, and they were told categorically this is a dumbass idea, and they doubled down and they just moved ahead. That shows poor strategic judgment. So they're letting people go who are kind of going, in this culture, as part of the informed captain, you must farm for dissent. You didn't do that, Dov. So I think that's where this alignment thing really plays key.
I love that, because one of the things that I'll say when I work with an organization is inevitably in your interviews, you will ask, give me an example of a time when you thought outside the box.
Yeah.
They tell you that and then you punish them for coloring outside the box once you've hired them. It's like, what the hell are you doing? You've asked them to think outside the box, but you can only think inside the box once you get here. This is a mixed message. Just one thing I wanted to tap over to was something you mentioned because you've been talking about Netflix. And again, this is another changing arena, which is entertainment. I've talked about recently in some of my work, I said if you wanted to level up, go from working class to middle class and potentially upper middle class in the United States, in the 1960s, you moved to a place called Detroit because there was lots of business there. There was a chance for jobs. There was promotions. There was an economy built around the big three, around cars. By the way, if you go to Detroit now, it's the Rust Belt. It's a disaster. It's very poor. Economically, it's struggling in all kinds of ways. I believe the new Detroit is Los Angeles.
Okay.
Because the entertainment industry is moving out of LA. It's scattered around the US, the smaller studios. People through AI are able to create studios. And now, because of things like TikTok, there are something called micro dramas. And China has built the biggest studios in the world for micro dramas. So there's another piece of how they're getting ahead. Now, by the way, in case you don't know what a micro drama is, it's a fully arced episode that lasts maximum 7 minutes. Back before COVID, I was saying to people, a movie is going to be 20 minutes and a TV show is going to be 7. And people are like, you're nuts, Dov. I'm telling you, a movie, full arc of all the characters, 20 minutes, because we've been trained through the bloody phone to pay very little attention. So that's another area that China is, again, like going, oh, we can see it. We're getting ahead of it.
Yeah.
Do you see that? Have you been to any of those studios?
We had a leader from Netflix with us in China a while back. We were visiting ByteDance, who own TikTok, and we saw this, and it's not even 7 minutes. You're getting dropping episodes of soap operas.
90 seconds.
60 to 90 seconds. He was like, wow, this is the attention economy. How are we doing that? So absolutely, we saw it. The other evolution of this, Dov, is what you're seeing now in China. This isn't to do with entertainment, but also the deployment of avatars in customer-facing positions and customer-facing roles, whereby they're rolling out avatars at an unbelievable scale now to be the customer-facing interface with brands. There's a technology layer that enables employees, when they clock off, to create an avatar of themselves, which is now dealing with the customer inquiries when the employee themselves is asleep. And some of those avatars are scoring higher on customer satisfaction than the individuals are. It's incredible. But again, this threw up a massive questions. One of my clients, when faced with this, because we know China's at the edge, and so avatars will come to Europe and America 2 years time. She literally said it was one of my favorite moments of the entire week in China with 20 leaders from around the globe. She said, oh shit, after 25 years in marketing, I never realized I needed brand guidelines for avatars. And it's a really serious question. What does an avatar for my company look like, sound like? What's its tone of voice? Is it humorous? Is it intelligent? You start getting into, right, and then it's a whole about my voice. What's my voice of my organization? When also voice is starting to come into play and typing is going away. If I'm consuming a movie in 6 minutes or a soap opera in 30-second segments, that's shifting consumer behavior and expectations, which means as a brand and as an organization, you need to start thinking, how do I tap into this trend? So rather than producing beautiful corporate videos that last 5 minutes to sit on your website, how am I embracing this technology, this trend, to make sure I'm remaining relevant, talking to this audience? Because consumer behavior is changing. I was reading last week, I think it's about 70% of all search now on the internet for Americans under 30 is on ChatGPT.
Right. You talking about like Netflix and their very innovative process, but they could get their breakfast eaten too through China, through these micro dramas.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to have everybody grasp is nobody's safe. Even the companies that you think of like ChatGPT or OpenAI or Netflix, these companies at the top, they're not safe. We think they're safe, but they're not, because there are companies who are recognizing the trends faster. These studios that are built in China for the micro dramas, etc. And for me, it's like, come on, pay attention. Hollywood's going away.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. As I said, it's the new Detroit. I do futurist work around that. And people are like, wow, I never considered that. Yes.
And I think you're right. There's a great quote that taps into this because Netflix could be disrupted by a startup that comes up with a new business model based on micro dramas, micro soap operas, micro films, all that incumbent infrastructure. It takes off, and all of a sudden, Netflix is playing catch up. And I think this goes to a point which was Mark Andreessen of Andreessen Horowitz had a great quote around the variant of the innovator's dilemma. This gets to the point which is the battle between every startup, for example, could take on Netflix with super short form content, and every incumbent comes down to whether the startup can get scale before the incumbent gets innovation.
That's really good. Yeah.
The innovator's dilemma, that is it. Can the startup get scale before the incumbent gets innovation? And that's what you've seen happen time and time again, where Netflix took out Blockbuster, famously, when Blockbuster had scale. Not Blockbuster failed to buy Netflix, and all of a sudden, a year, 18 months later, Netflix has now overtaken Blockbuster, and the incumbent doesn't get innovation and dies. And what you're talking to is, could the same happen to a Netflix? It could happen to anybody. If you'd have said, even 10 years ago, the global automotive industry could be taken over by the Chinese. So we were in China. We'd been to another astonishingly beautiful manufacturer of EVs called Niao. We were walking through the lobby of Tencent, one of the biggest players in China who own things like WeChat. We were just reflecting on the beauty of this vehicle. And this 26, 27-year-old Chinese national was hosting us. And he said, quote unquote, Dov, he said, "Oh my God, Niao, it's amazing. I have a Niao." He said, "My wife, she has an old-fashioned car. She has a BMW."
That's fantastic.
If you'd have said even 5 years ago that quote could be happening, you'd have gone, "You are crazy." And suddenly it just changes. The world just changes. But if you said, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, the Chinese will become the most aspirational vehicles in the world, you'd have gone, "Adrian, you're mad." They've disintermediated, disrupted the global car industry. They launch a new car every 12 to 18 months. It takes most European players 4 to 6 years.
That's crazy. Adrian, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your afternoon, evening. Before we go, I want to make sure that people know how to find out more about you, about Wavelength, your organization, and any other resources that you have. Please let people know.
Thank you very much, Dov. My specialism is bringing the outside world in for leaders. That's what we do. I think the need to do that has never been greater because the insularity and obsolescence is a biggest risk. Go to wavelengthleadership.com is the best way to reach us. You can subscribe there to our newsletter, into our LinkedIn feeds. We'd be delighted to engage in a conversation. Anybody who's interested in perhaps pressing the pause button and really understanding what's happening in the frontiers of business and technology.
Fantastic. And I hope you'll stay with us to the end. And for you, dear listener, remember, if you didn't catch any of that for any reason, just look in the show notes. We'll make sure that all the links to Adrian and to his organization and all the resources are posted in the show notes. Remember, for those who control the meaning for the tribe, also control the movement of that tribe. Leaders who are committed to positively shaping the political and business landscape know that they must tap into what drives human behavior. I'm Dov Baron. I work with elite leaders across industries who are committed to soulfully guiding the destiny of the world, showing businesses, teams, and leaders how to harness their emotional source code to move their tribe. Because unified, actualized meaning is the single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness for individuals and companies. Remember, we need your help in staying relevant, so please go to wherever it is you tune in from. I know that you listen, but have you left a review? Have you rated the show? That really helps the algorithm, lets people know about us. We really appreciate it if you do that. Thank you, and you can leave us a comment and I'll get back to you. And of course, a big thank you to you who are regular listeners for sharing the show with everybody you know. We really appreciate it. The more you share it, the more other people can be part of that. Till next time, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about how innovation is not coming. You're living in it. And the denial of it might be the end of your organization in the form that you know it. As Adrian just talked about, you've got to innovate very fast, and you've got to make sure that you're paying attention to what's happening We no longer can afford ignorance. Technology is not just moving organizations or even economies. It's moving political aspirations at every possible level. Nobody is going to be free of this. We all have to get on board with it. I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into your deepest meaning to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.